The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Meridian cast dancing shadows across white linen tablecloths as Natalie Green balanced 3 plates along her tired arm. 24 years old with auburn hair pulled into a practical bun and emerald eyes that had seen too many double shifts, she moved through the dining room with practiced efficiency. Her black uniform was pressed crisp despite the humidity of the kitchen, her white shirt buttoned to the collar, her apron tied with precision born from necessity rather than pride. Natalie had learned early that invisibility was survival in places like this. Rich patrons came to see and be seen, not to notice the hands that poured their wine or cleared their plates. She had perfected the art of being present yet unnoticed, efficient yet forgettable. Most nights, this strategy worked perfectly. Tonight would be different. At tea table 7 sat 4 men who wore their wealth like armor. Richard Blackwell, silver-haired and sharp-featured, drummed manicured fingers on the mahogany table. Jeffrey Strauss, younger but equally arrogant, checked his platinum watch every few minutes. Vincent Moore laughed too loudly at his own jokes, his voice carrying across the quiet elegance of the restaurant. Julian Hartley, the youngest of the group, seemed eager to prove himself worthy of their company through increasingly crude behavior. They had been drinking since 7. It was now past 9. Natalie approached their table carefully, tray balanced perfectly. The lobster bisque steamed gently in delicate porcelain bowls. She had checked each presentation twice, knowing these particular customers complained about everything from temperature to garnish placement. Finally, someone who knows how to work, Richard drawled as she set down the first bowl. His eyes traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Tell me, sweetheart, do you enjoy serving your betters?" Natalie kept her expression neutral. "I enjoy doing my job." "Well, sir, is there anything else you need?" Jeffrey leaned back in his chair, studying her with amusement. "Your job, how noble. Tell us, what does a job like this pay? Minimum wage plus humiliation?" The other men laughed. Natalie felt heat creep up her neck, but maintained her composure. "The soup is fresh today. Chef recommends it. Will there be anything else?" Vincent plucked a roll from the breadbasket and tossed it toward her. It bounced off her shoulder and fell to the marble floor. "Oops," he said, with mock concern. "Better pick that up. We wouldn't want anyone to trip." The restaurant had gone quiet. Other diners watched from behind menus and wine glasses. Nobody moved to help. Nobody spoke up. This was entertainment for some, discomfort for others, but intervention for none. Natalie bent to retrieve the roll, her face burning. She had dealt with difficult customers before, but something about tonight felt different, crueler, more deliberate. As she straightened, Julian grabbed his water glass and tilted it slightly, letting liquid splash onto her shoes. His laughter was sharp and cutting. "So sorry. These hands just don't behave after a few drinks. You understand, don't you?" She understood perfectly. This was not about service or mistakes. This was about power. They had money, status, and the protection of social position. She had none of these things. She was meant to absorb their cruelty without complaint, to smile and nod and thank them for the privilege of being their target. But Natalie also understood something else. She understood that her younger brother Tommy, 12 years old and confined to a wheelchair after a car accident 2 years ago, depended on her paychecks for his physical therapy. She understood that her mother, working 2 jobs herself, couldn't carry the financial burden alone. She understood that dignity was a luxury she could not currently afford. So she smiled. A small, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, sir. Accidents happen. Let me get you fresh water." Richard leaned forward, his voice dropping to a stage whisper loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Look at her, so desperate to keep this pathetic job that she'll let us treat her like garbage. That's what I call knowing your place." The words hit harder than the bread roll. Natalie's hands trembled as she gathered the empty bread basket. Her vision blurred slightly, tears threatening despite her determination not to give them the satisfaction. Vincent stood suddenly, pulling out his wallet with exaggerated slowness. "Here," he announced loudly, placing a $1 bill on her tray. "For exceptional service. Buy yourself something nice. Maybe a sense of self-respect." The laughter that followed felt like knives. Natalie stood frozen, the dollar bill sitting on her tray like an insult made physical. Every eye in the restaurant watched her. Some faces showed pity, others showed contempt. Most showed nothing at all. The careful blankness of people who had learned not to get involved. From across the room, Derek, the restaurant manager, her gaze briefly before looking away. His message was clear. Don't make a scene. Don't upset paying customers. Your job depends on silence. Natalie wanted to throw the tray down. She wanted to tell these men exactly what she thought of their money and their cruelty. She wanted to walk out with her head high and never return. But Tommy needed his therapy. Her mother needed help with rent. Bills didn't care about dignity. She placed the dollar bill in her apron pocket and lifted the tray. Thank you, gentlemen. I'll bring your entrees shortly. As she turned away, Jeffrey's voice followed her. That's right. Run along. Good help is so hard to find these days. Their laughter chased her across the marble floor. Natalie pushed through the kitchen doors, her composure finally cracking. She leaned against the stainless steel counter, pressing her palms flat against the cool surface, trying to steady her breathing. Carlos, the head chef, glanced over with sympathy but said nothing. Everyone knew the rules. Customers were always right, even when they were unquestionably wrong. Natalie closed her eyes, willing herself not to cry. She had survived worse. She would survive this. She had to, but as she prepared to return to the dining room with their entrees, she made a silent promise to herself. One day, things would be different. One day, she would have choices. One day, men like those at table 7 would not have the power to make her feel small. She straightened her uniform, checked her reflection in the polished surface of a steel door, and lifted another tray. The night was far from over. What Natalie didn't know, as she stepped back into the dining room, was that someone else had just entered the Grand Meridian. Someone who would change the trajectory of her evening and ultimately, her entire life. The heavy oak doors swung open, and a figure stepped into the restaurant. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with quiet confidence that needed no announcement. His suit was tailored perfectly but understated, charcoal gray without flash or pretension. Dark hair swept back from a strong face, and eyes the color of storm clouds, surveyed the room with calm intelligence. Conversations didn't stop so much as pause, as if the air itself had shifted. The maitre d' rushed forward with practiced deference. Mr. Cross, we weren't expecting you this evening. Damian Cross, 32 years old and worth more money than everyone in the restaurant combined, offered a slight nod. I was in the neighborhood, but his attention had already moved past the maitre d', scanning the dining room until his gaze landed on table 7. On 4 men laughing too loudly, on the scattered bread on the floor, on the young waitress, approaching with a tray and eyes that held barely concealed pain. Something in his expression hardened. The game, though nobody yet realized it, had changed completely. Natalie approached table 7 with the entrees, each step requiring conscious effort. The filet mignon was cooked to perfection, the herb-crusted salmon glistened under the lights, and the duck confit had been plated with artistic precision. She had double-checked everything in the kitchen. Knowing these men would find fault regardless of quality, Richard looked up as she arrived, his expression shifting from boredom to malicious amusement. Ah, our little servant returns. We were just discussing whether you'd have the courage to come back. Natalie said nothing. She began placing plates in front of each man with mechanical precision. Her hands remained steady. Through sheer force of will, Jeffrey picked up his knife and fork, examining his steak with theatrical scrutiny. This looks overdone. I ordered medium rare. It is medium rare, sir. Natalie kept her voice even. I can have the chef prepare another if you prefer. Vincent laughed harshly. Listen to her. So polite. So professional. Tell me, do they train you to take abuse, or does it come naturally to people in your position? Before Natalie could respond, a voice cut through the conversation like a blade through silk. Cold, controlled, and carrying the weight of absolute authority. I believe the lady asked if you needed anything else. Every head at the table turned. Damian Cross stood 3 feet away, hands in his pockets, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp as cut glass. He had moved so quietly that none of them had noticed his approach, Richard recovered first, his face shifting into an oily smile. Mr. Cross, what an unexpected pleasure. We were just having dinner. I'd see that. Damien's gaze moved deliberately to the bread on the floor, the wet spots on Natalie's shoes, the single-dollar bill visible in her apron pocket. Looks like quite an eventful meal. Jeffrey's smile became strained. Just some harmless fun with the staff. You know how it is. No. Damien's voice remained calm. I don't know how it is. Perhaps you could explain it to me. The temperature at the table seemed to drop 10 degrees. Julian shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Vincent stopped laughing. These four men, who had spent the evening wielding their wealth like weapons against someone defenseless, suddenly found themselves facing someone who operated on an entirely different level of power. Richard attempted recovery. Mr. Cross, surely you understand that maintaining proper hierarchy is important in service industries. We were simply reminding this young woman of professional standards. By throwing food at her? Damien's eyebrow lifted slightly. That's an interesting management technique. I'll have to mention it to my HR department. I'm sure they'll be fascinated. Natalie stood frozen, tray clutched against her chest. She wanted to disappear. Being defended was almost worse than being attacked, because it made the humiliation public in a different way. She was no longer invisible. She was a spectacle. Damien seemed to sense her discomfort. He turned to her directly, his voice softening. You're Natalie, correct? I heard the manager use your name earlier. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Would you mind giving us a moment? I need to discuss something with these gentlemen. Business matters. Relief flooded through her. She nodded again and retreated quickly, grateful for the escape. Behind her, she heard Damien's voice drop lower, but the words carried with crystal clarity. Gentlemen, let me introduce myself properly. My name is Damien Cross. Perhaps you recognize it from the investment proposals your companies have been sending my office for the past 6 months. The color drained from Richard's face. Jeffrey's fork clattered onto his plate. Vincent suddenly found his water glass intensely interesting. Blackwell Industries. Damien continued conversationally, addressing Richard. Seeking $200 million for expansion into Asian markets. Strauss Financial. He nodded to Jeffrey, requesting $150 million for a merger acquisition. More Technologies. Vincent flinched at his name, hoping for $300 million to develop your new software platform. And Hartley Investments. Julian looked like he might be sick, wanting $100 million to establish a European branch. The silence at the table was absolute. Across the restaurant, Natalie watched from the service station, her heart pounding. Other diners had stopped pretending not to listen. Now here's what interests me, Damien said, pulling out the fourth chair and sitting down without invitation. I'm always curious about how people treat those they perceive as beneath them. It tells me a great deal about character, about integrity, about whether they deserve partnership or should be avoided entirely. Richard found his voice. Mr. Cross, I assure you this was a misunderstanding. Was it? Damien's gaze was steady. So you didn't throw bread at that young woman? You didn't spill water on her shoes deliberately? You didn't place a single dollar on her tray, as if her dignity was worth pocket change? Julian spoke up desperately. We've been drinking. We weren't thinking clearly. Interesting defense. Damien leaned back. So alcohol reveals your true character. Good to know. I'll make sure to mention that in my notes when your proposals come up for review. Jeffrey tried a different approach. Mr. Cross, surely you understand that the service industry exists to serve. These people are paid to handle difficult customers. These people. Damien repeated the phrase slowly. Tell me, Jeffrey, what makes you better than Natalie? Your birth? Your education? Your bank account? All of it, Jeffrey said, then realized his mistake too late. I see. Damien stood smoothly. Then let me share something interesting. I grew up in foster care. My mother was a waitress who died from exhaustion at 43. I built my first business washing dishes in a restaurant not unlike this one. So when you say these people, you're talking about where I come from. The four men looked stricken. Richard opened his mouth, but Damien raised a hand. I'm going to make this very simple. Your companies will not receive funding from Cross Enterprises. Not now, not ever. I don't do business with people who believe cruelty is entertainment. But Vincent started. Furthermore, Damien continued as if he hadn't spoken, I'll be informing my network about this evening. I have friends who control approximately 40% of available venture capital in this city. I suspect they'll find the story as enlightening as I did. You can't do this, Richard said, panic creeping into his voice. I can. And I am. Damien's voice remained perfectly calm. Consider it a lesson in consequences. The people you hurt have value. The people you mock have worth. And sometimes, the people you underestimate have power. He turned and walked away, leaving 4 wealthy men staring at their expensive meals with expressions of dawning horror. Their evening of cruel entertainment had just cost them hundreds of millions of dollars, and possibly their careers. Damien found Natalie near the kitchen doors. She looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and fear. Can we talk? He asked gently. Somewhere quiet? She hesitated, then nodded. I have a 10-minute break. 5 minutes later, they sat at a small table on the restaurant's back patio. Jasmine vines climbed the brick walls, and soft lights glowed in the gathering darkness. Natalie perched nervously on the edge of her chair, still wearing her apron, still looking ready to flee. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Yes, I did. Damien's voice was firm but kind. They were wrong. Someone needed to say it. Now, they'll hate me more. She twisted her hands together. You don't understand what it's like. I can't afford to make enemies. I need this job. Why? The question surprised her. Because bills exist. Because my brother Tommy needs physical therapy 3 times a week. Because my mother works herself to exhaustion and still can't make ends meet. Because people like me don't get choices. What would you do? Damien asked. If money wasn't a factor, if you could choose anything? Natalie laughed bitterly. That's not reality. Humor me. She was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I'd study graphic design. I used to draw constantly. Created designs for everything. Book covers, logos, websites. But art school costs money. Life got in the way. Show me. What? Your work. Show me something you've designed. Natalie hesitated, then pulled out her phone. She scrolled through photos until she found sketches she'd photographed months ago. Damien studied them carefully, his expression thoughtful. These are good. Really good. Why aren't you pursuing this? She stared at him as if he'd spoken a foreign language. Because dreamers starve. Because talent doesn't pay rent. Because the world doesn't care about what I want. The world might surprise you. Damien handed back her phone. Talent combined with work ethic is rare. You have both. You don't know me. I know enough. His gray eyes held hers. I know you show up for your shifts even when customers treat you like dirt. I know you support your family without complaint. I know you've held on to your dreams even when life tried to crush them. That tells me everything important. Natalie felt tears prick her eyes. Nobody had spoken to her this way in years. Nobody had looked at her sketches and seen possibility instead of foolishness. Why do you care? She asked. You're a billionaire. I'm a waitress. We exist in completely different worlds. Because someone cared about me once. Damien's voice held old pain. A restaurant owner named Maria gave me a chance when I was 18 and homeless. She let me sleep in the storage room, fed me leftovers, taught me that dignity isn't determined by bank accounts. She died before I could pay her back. So now, I pay it forward whenever possible. I don't need charity. Good. I don't offer it. His expression turned serious. What I'm offering is information. There are scholarships for adult students, grants for people with talent and drive, resources that exist if you know where to look. And you just happen to know where to look. I do. But whether you pursue them is entirely up to you. He stood, pulling a business card from his pocket. This is my assistant's number. If you want help finding opportunities, call her. If you don't, that's your choice too. Either way, you deserve better than what happened tonight. He walked away before she could respond. Natalie sat alone in the jasmine-scented darkness, holding his card, her mind spinning. Part of her wanted to throw the card away. Part of her wanted to call immediately. Oliver felt the foundation of her world shifting in ways she couldn't fully understand. Inside, Derek, the manager, appeared at the patio door. Breaks over. Table 12 needs service. Natalie stood, tucking the card carefully into her pocket beside the insulting dollar bill. The contrast between the two pieces of paper felt symbolic, somehow. One represented cruelty, the other represented possibility. She returned to work, but everything felt different now. The weight of trays seemed lighter. The sneers of difficult customers seemed less sharp. Something had changed inside her, something small but vital. Hope, she realized. For the first time in years, she felt the dangerous, fragile beginning of hope. Across the restaurant, Damien sat at his own table, pretending to read a menu while watching Natalie move through the dining room. She stood straighter now, moved with more confidence. The light in her eyes hadn't completely returned, but it flickered. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. The 4 men from table 7 are already calling, offering apologies and requesting meetings. He typed back. Decline all requests. No second chances for cruelty. Setting down his phone, Damien allowed himself a small smile. He couldn't save everyone. He couldn't fix every injustice. But tonight, he'd reminded 4 arrogant men that money doesn't buy immunity from consequences, and perhaps more importantly, he'd reminded one exhausted young woman that she deserved better than the world had given her. Whether she believed it yet remained to be seen. 3 days passed before Natalie touched the business card again. It sat in her wallet, tucked behind her expired student ID from community college, a reminder of both possibility and risk. She went through her shifts in a fog, her mind replaying that conversation on the patio over and over. The restaurant felt different now. Derek avoided eye contact, clearly uncomfortable about his failure to intervene. Some coworkers whispered when she passed, their speculation ranging from sympathy to jealousy. The story had spread quickly, the waitress defended by Damien Cross himself. On Thursday evening, Carlos pulled her aside in the kitchen. They're saying you're dating him. He kept his voice low, concerned rather than accusatory. They're wrong. Natalie checked her order ticket for the 3rd time, not meeting his eyes. He was just being decent. That's all. Decent men don't usually destroy for business careers over a waitress they just met. Maybe he believes in fairness, Carlos sighed. Just be careful, Natalie. Men with that much power, they don't do anything without reasons. She wanted to argue, but couldn't. He was right to be suspicious. She was suspicious, too. Why would someone like Damien Cross care about someone like her? There had to be an angle, hidden motivation. Rich men didn't defend poor women out of pure kindness. That only happened in stories, and yet, she couldn't forget the way he'd looked at her sketches. The genuine interest in his eyes. The respect in his voice. Either he was an excellent actor, or he actually meant what he said. Friday night brought a new complication. The 4 men returned. Natalie saw them from across the dining room, and her stomach dropped. They were seated at a different table, quieter than before, their expensive suits somehow looking less impressive. Richard caught her eye and had the decency to look ashamed. Derek hurried over to her. Different section. I'm putting Carlos's wife Gabriela on that table. You don't have to go near them. Relief washed through her. Thank you. But as the evening progressed, curiosity won out. During a lull, she found herself drifting close enough to hear their conversation. 3 investors pulled out today, Jeffrey was saying, his voice tight with stress. They all mentioned hearing something about my character, about how I treat people. Same here, Vincent muttered. My board is asking questions. Apparently, someone's been making calls. Julian pushed his food around, his plate untouched. My father wants to know why Damien Cross personally vetoed our European expansion. I had to tell him the truth. He's not speaking to me. Richard, the oldest of the group, looked haggard. We underestimated her. That waitress. We thought she was nobody. We thought there'd be no consequences. There shouldn't have been, Jeffrey said bitterly. She's just a server. How were we supposed to know Cross would care? We shouldn't have needed Cross, Vincent said quietly. We should have cared. His companions stared at him. What? I'm not defending what we did. I'm saying we were wrong. Genuinely wrong. Whether Cross showed up or not, The others looked uncomfortable. Admitting fault clearly didn't come naturally to men accustomed to being right by virtue of wealth. Natalie moved away before they could see her. Their regret should have felt satisfying, but instead, she felt oddly hollow. They weren't sorry for hurting her. They were sorry for getting caught. Sorry for facing consequences. There was a difference. That night, after her shift ended, Natalie walked home through streets growing cold with approaching autumn. Her apartment was in a neighborhood that real estate agents called emerging and residents called struggling. 3 flights up, in a building where the elevator worked sporadically and the heat even less often, she found her mother, Patricia, asleep on the couch with medical bills spread across the coffee table. Tommy sat in his wheelchair by the window, sketching in a notebook. "Hey, sis." He looked up with a grin. "Rough night?" "Just long." She kissed the top of his head, studying his drawing. A superhero in a wheelchair, cape flying, saving people from a burning building. "That's amazing." Tommy.Mr. Rodriguez says I should enter it in a contest. The art teacher at school thinks I could win. You should. Natalie's throat tightened. "You're incredibly talented. Like you were. Before you had to quit school to take care of us." The guilt in his voice broke her heart. "That's not your fault. Any of this still feels like it." He set down his pencil. "Mom told me about what happened at the restaurant. About those men. About the guy who stood up for you. Word travels fast. Are you okay?" Natalie sat on the arm of his wheelchair. "Honestly, I don't know. Part of me wants to forget it ever happened. Another part keeps thinking about what he said. About opportunities. About not giving up on dreams. The rich guy? Yeah." She pulled out Damien's business card, showing it to Tommy. "He said I should call his assistant. That there might be scholarships or grants for design school." Tommy's eyes widened. "Are you going to?" "I don't know. What if it's just pity? What if I call and they laugh at me? What if you don't call and miss your only chance?" The wisdom in his 12-year-old voice surprised her. "When did you get so smart?" "I learned from my sister." He wheeled himself closer. "Natalie, you've sacrificed everything for us. For me, Mom, and I see it. We know it. But you can't save us by destroying yourself. If this guy is offering help, even just information, take it, please." She blinked back tears. "What about your therapy? The bills? We'll figure it out. Like we always do." Tommy gripped her hand. "But you need to figure out your life too. You're 24. You should be in school, building a career, living, not just surviving." That night, Natalie lay in bed, unable to sleep. Tommy's words echoed in her mind. Her phone sat on the nightstand, Damien's card beside it. She picked it up a dozen times, then set it down. Fear and hope waged war inside her chest. Finally, at 2 in the morning, she sent a text. "This is Natalie Green from the Grand Meridian. Mr. Cross said to contact his assistant about educational opportunities. Is this offer still available?" She didn't expect a response until morning. But 5 minutes later, her phone buzzed. "Hello, Natalie. This is Rebecca Chen, Mr. Cross's executive assistant." "Yes, absolutely still available. Are you free for a call tomorrow afternoon? Let's discuss options." Natalie stared at the message, her heart racing. This was real. This was happening. She replied, "Yes, I'm free after 3. Thank you." 3 dots appeared then. "Looking forward to speaking with you. Mr. Cross mentioned you have exceptional talent. I'm excited to help however I can." The next afternoon, Natalie sat in a coffee shop for the phone call. Rebecca was warm, efficient, and surprisingly knowledgeable about art programs and financial aid. She explained scholarships Natalie had never heard of, grants for students with financial hardship, work-study programs that could provide income while studying. "There's also something else," Rebecca said carefully. "Mr. Cross has established a fund for service industry workers pursuing education. It's anonymous, no strings attached. You would qualify based on your work history and talent alone. I can't take his money." The words came out reflexively. "That's charity. It's investment." Rebecca's voice was patient. "Mr. Cross invests in people he believes in. He's done this for dozens of workers over the years. Most recipients never meet him. He doesn't want gratitude or recognition. He wants people to succeed. Why? Because someone helped him once, and he remembers what it felt like to be talented and trapped. Natalie was quiet, processing. Finally, she said, I need to think about it, of course. Take your time. In the meantime, I'm emailing you information about programs that don't involve Mr. Cross's fund. Options you can pursue independently. No pressure, no obligations. Thank you. Natalie's voice cracked slightly. Really? Thank you. After hanging up, she sat for a long time staring at her coffee. Pride warred with practicality. She wanted to succeed on her own merit, not because a billionaire felt sorry for her, but was turning down help just stubbornness? Or was accepting it compromising her integrity? That evening at work, something unexpected happened. Derek called her into his office before her shift. She expected a lecture, maybe a firing. Instead, she found a man who looked deeply uncomfortable. Natalie, I owe you an apology. He couldn't quite meet her eyes. I should have intervened that night. I should have protected you. I let fear of losing wealthy customers override what was right. She said nothing, waiting. Things are going to change here. Derek continued. Mr. Cross purchased the restaurant 3 days ago. He's implementing new policies. Zero tolerance for customer harassment of staff. Mandatory respect training for all employees. Better pay, better benefits. He bought the restaurant. Natalie felt the world tilt again. Didn't say why, but his lawyers were very clear about the new standards. He also specifically requested that you be offered a promotion. Assistant manager position. Flexible hours so you can attend classes if you choose. I don't want special treatment. It's not special treatment. Derek finally met her gaze. Your work ethic is excellent. Your customer service ratings are top tier. You've earned this. Mr. Cross just made sure it was offered. Natalie left his office in a daze. Everything was changing too fast. The life she'd known, difficult and exhausting, but at least predictable, was dissolving. In its place was something new and terrifying and full of possibility. She pulled out her phone and, before she could overthink it, called the number on Damien's card. This time, he answered personally. I don't need saving. Her voice trembled, but held firm. I don't need rescue or charity. I need a chance. Just a fair chance. That's exactly what I'm offering. His voice was calm, reassuring. Nothing more, nothing less. Why me? There are thousands of people like me. Why do you care? Because you remind me of someone I used to be. And because the world has too few people who hold on to their dreams, despite everything. That's worth investing in. I'll pay you back. Every penny. The words tumbled out. I don't know how long it'll take, but I will. I don't want repayment. I want you to succeed, and then help someone else the way I'm helping you. Natalie wiped at her eyes. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't give up on yourself. After they hung up, Natalie stood in the back alley, evening air cool against her flushed cheeks. For the first time in years, her future felt like more than just an endless series of shifts and bills and exhaustion. It felt like possibility. Inside, through the kitchen window, she could see the dining room filling with customers. Her coworkers rushing between tables. The familiar chaos of service industry life. But she was looking at it differently now. Not as a trap, but as a stepping stone. She straightened her shoulders, adjusted her apron, and went back inside. She still had work to do, bills to pay, family to support. But now, those responsibilities felt lighter, because they weren't the end of her story. They were just a chapter, and new chapters were beginning to write themselves, each one full of promise. She'd forgotten how to imagine. 6 weeks later, Natalie stood in front of the mirror in her tiny bathroom, barely recognizing herself. She wore her first day of school outfit, dark jeans, a crisp white shirt, and a blazer she'd found at a thrift store. Her hair was down, falling in waves past her shoulders. She looked like a student. She looked like someone with a future. Tommy wheeled up behind her. You look like you're about to conquer the world. I'm terrified. She adjusted her collar for the 5th time. What if I can't keep up? What if everyone else is younger, smart, more talented? Then you'll work harder. That's what you always do. He grinned. Besides, you're Natalie Green. You survived 4 rich jerks throwing bread at you with your dignity intact. Art school will be easy, she laughed, despite her nerves. When did you become the wise one? I've always been wise. You were just too busy taking care of me to notice. Patricia appeared in the doorway, still in her nurse's uniform from the night shift. She looked exhausted, but proud. First day of school. I wish I could go with you, Mom. You need to sleep. I need to see this. Patricia's eyes were wet. My daughter, going back to school, after everything you've sacrificed. I need to see it. So the three of them took a taxi to Riverside School of Design, the community's best visual arts program. The scholarship Rebecca had helped Natalie secure covered tuition completely. The assistant manager position at the Grand Meridian, with its flexible hours and better pay, made everything else possible. As they pulled up to the modern glass building, Natalie felt her breath catch. Students poured through the doors, carrying portfolios and laptops, talking animatedly about projects and deadlines. This was her world. Now, this was her chance. Go get them, sis. Tommy squeezed her hand. And remember, you belong here. Your talent earned this, not anyone's pin. She nodded, gathering her courage, and stepped out of the taxi. The autumn air was crisp and full of possibility. She was 24 years old, starting over, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. The first few weeks were overwhelming. Her classmates were mostly younger, fresh from high school, unburdened by bills and family responsibilities. They talked casually about art theory and design principles she'd had to teach herself from library books. But what Natalie lacked in formal training, she made up for in raw determination. She was the first to arrive at studio sessions and the last to leave. Her sketches covered every available surface in her apartment. She absorbed criticism like a sponge, incorporating feedback with a work ethic that impressed even her toughest professors. Professor Williams, a stern woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, stopped her after class one day. You have something rare, Natalie. Natural talent combined with discipline. Don't waste it. I won't. Natalie's voice held absolute conviction. I can't afford to. Meanwhile, at the Grand Meridian, the changes Damien had implemented transformed the entire atmosphere. Staff were treated with respect. Customers who behaved poorly were asked to leave, regardless of how much money they spent. The dollar bill incident had become legend, a cautionary tale whispered among wealthy diners who now thought twice before being cruel. Natalie still worked 3 evenings a week, but the dynamic had shifted entirely. She was no longer invisible. She was seen, respected, valued. Derek had become a supportive manager, and her co-workers had stopped whispering about her connection to Damien Cross. Damien himself had become an unexpected presence in her life. Not romantic, not exactly friendship, but something indefinable. He came to the restaurant occasionally, always sitting in her section when she worked, asking about her classes and reviewing her latest designs when she showed them. One evening, during a quiet moment between orders, he studied a logo she'd created for a class project. This is sophisticated. The color balance is perfect. You really think so? She tried to hide her pleasure at his approval. Professor Williams said the font choice was too safe. Safe isn't always bad. Sometimes clarity matters more than innovation. He handed back her sketchbook. But you should trust your instincts more. You second-guess yourself too much. I'm still learning. We're all still learning. The difference is confidence. You've earned the right to trust your talent. Their conversations became a regular occurrence. Damien never overstepped, never made her uncomfortable, never treated her as anything other than an equal. It was strange and wonderful, this friendship with someone from an entirely different world. Rebecca occasionally joined them, becoming a friend and mentor in her own right. She'd grown up poor too, worked her way through school while supporting younger siblings, understood Natalie's journey in ways few others could. You're doing it right, Rebecca told her over coffee one Saturday, using help as a boost, not a crutch. Building something sustainable, that's what success looks like. I'm terrified of failing, of proving that people like me don't belong in places like design school. People like you built design school. Rebecca's voice was firm. Working class people, immigrants, first-generation students. The art world pretends it's always been elite, but the truth is messier and more beautiful. You have every right to be there. The semester progressed. Natalie's portfolio grew stronger. Her confidence grew with it. But she never forgot where she came from or the people who helped her along the way. When Jeffrey Strauss appeared at the restaurant one evening, Natalie felt her stomach tighten. He was alone this time, looking older somehow, less sure of himself. He waited until her section cleared, then approached quietly. "Natalie, could I speak with you?" Just for a moment, she wanted to refuse, but curiosity won out. They stepped onto the patio where she'd first spoken with Damien. "I owe you an apology." Jeffrey's voice was sincere, stripped of its former arrogance. A real one. "What we did that night was unforgivable. You were just doing your job, and we treated you like you were beneath us. Like you weren't human." Natalie said nothing, waiting. "I've spent the last 2 months in therapy," my wife insisted. "Turns out I have a lot of issues with power and control." He laughed bitterly. "Losing my company gave me time to reflect, to realize that money had made me cruel." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to hear it. Not because Cross ruined my career, though he did, but because you deserved better treatment. That night, and every night before it. I'm sorry. Truly sorry." Natalie studied his face, looking for manipulation or hidden agenda. She found only genuine remorse. "Thank you. That means something. I heard you're in design school now." "That's wonderful. I hope you succeed." After he left, Natalie stood alone in the jasmine-scented air, processing. Forgiveness wasn't simple or automatic, but seeing Jeffrey's genuine regret made her realize something important. Holding onto anger would only poison her future. She could acknowledge the wrong without letting it define her. The final week of the semester brought portfolio reviews. Students presented their best work to professors and visiting industry professionals. Natalie's hands shook as she set up her presentation. Her sketches, her designs, her dreams made visible for judgment. Professor Williams introduced her to the guest reviewers. "This is Natalie Green, first semester student, but her portfolio rivals our senior classwork." Natalie presented her pieces, explaining her design philosophy, her inspiration, her process. The reviewers asked tough questions. She answered with growing confidence, her voice steady, her passion evident. When she finished, one of the reviewers, a woman who ran a successful design firm downtown, handed Natalie her card. "I'd like to offer you an internship. Starting next semester. Paid position, flexible hours. Your work is exceptional." Natalie stood frozen, card in hand, unable to process what had just happened. An internship, paid, at a real firm. This was beyond her wildest hopes. "Thank you," she managed. "I'd be honored." That evening, she called Damien, not because she owed him, but because he'd become someone she wanted to share good news with. "I got an internship." She could hear the joy in her own voice. "A real one, at a design firm. They liked my work." "Of course they did. You're talented." His pride came through clearly. "I'm not surprised, Natalie. Just happy for you. None of this would have happened without you." "Wrong. All of this happened because of you. I just removed a few obstacles. The rest was your work, your talent, your determination." After hanging up, Natalie sat on her fire escape, looking out over the city. Lights twinkled in the darkness, each one representing someone's life, someone's story, someone's dreams. She thought about the girl she'd been 6 weeks ago, exhausted and humiliated, convinced she'd never escaped the cycle of poverty and powerlessness. That girl was still part of her, would always be part of her, but she was also becoming someone new. Someone who belonged in design studios and portfolio reviews. Someone whose dreams were turning into reality. Tommy wheeled onto the fire escape beside her. "Big day, huge day." She put her arm around his shoulders. "How was yours, Mr. Rodriguez?" "Says my superhero design is going to be published in the school literary magazine." Tommy's voice held pride. "And he wants me to create illustrations for the spring play." "That's amazing." Natalie hugged him tight. "We're both making it, Tommy. Both of us. Thanks to you. And thanks to each other. And thanks to people who believed we deserved chances." They sat in comfortable silence. Two kids who'd been knocked down by life, but were learning to stand tall again. The city spread before them, full of challenges and opportunities, setbacks and triumphs. Inside, Patricia called them for dinner. As they went in, Natalie glanced back one more time at the glittering cityscape. Somewhere out there, Damien was probably working late, making deals, building empires. But he'd taken time to invest in her, not for profit or recognition, but because he believed in paying forward the kindness he'd once received. She would do the same someday. When she was established, successful, financially stable, she would find someone talented and trapped, someone who just needed a chance, and she would open doors the way Damien had opened doors for her. The cycle of cruelty could end. The cycle of kindness could continue. It started with one person deciding that dignity mattered more than hierarchy, that potential mattered more than profit, that everyone deserved to be seen as fully human. As she sat down to dinner with her family, Natalie felt gratitude wash over her, not just for Damien's help, but for her own strength, for Tommy's wisdom, for her mother's sacrifice, for every hard moment that had taught her resilience. She had been humiliated in a restaurant by men who thought money made them superior. She had been defended by a man who understood that true power comes from lifting others up. And she had discovered that her dreams weren't dead, just waiting. The journey wasn't over. There would be more struggles, more doubts, more obstacles. But Natalie knew something now that she hadn't known before. She belonged, not because someone gave her permission, but because she'd claimed her space through talent and determination. The wealthy men had laughed at her pain. The billionaire had entered and changed everything. But in the end, Natalie had changed herself. And that made all the difference.